Okay, looks like we have a quorum. I want to welcome the gentleman from Huntsville to this very august committee. Appreciate you joining us, and you come to the wrong place. I think these folks will all attest to that. It's all those rumors about all the assistance you get. We do the best we can with what we have. So, but welcome. Glad to have you join us. Clerk, call the roll.
Senator Albritton? Senator Butler? Senator Chastain?
Here.
Senator Figures? Here. Senator Gavan? Here. Senator Gudger?
Here.
Senator Hatcher? Senator Hovey?
Here.
Senator Melson? Senator Roberts?
Here.
Senator Sessions?
Here.
Senator Singleton? Senator Smitherman?
Here.
Senator Wagner? Senator Allen?
Here.
Senator Orr? 14. Right behind you. 14.
Okay, clerk, call the first bill.
Senate Bill 62 by Senator Orr.
All right, the first bill we have is one that I think is important for us to consider. Now, the gentleman from Coleman does have an amendment that's been circulated. I don't agree with the amendment. We'll have a vote on it, and he'll bring it in up or down. The bill does primarily three things. It exempt state and local, and that's the rub here, state and local sales taxes on baby products such as diapers, et cetera, baby formula that we tax fully, and also women's hygiene products that we tax fully. My rationale for bringing this bill is, we claim to support families with small children. As I think everybody in here may have had a child at one time or another, or been very close to one, a grandchild, whatever. A lot of expenses come to bear, and also we get into the supporting life and the importance of supporting families, and this seemed like a low-cost way to certainly do that as a state, those with infants and very, very small children. The other aspect on the feminine hygiene products, why should half of our population have to be taxed on something that is a necessity and the other half not? Now, we made good progress on another necessity being groceries last year that we can all be proud of, but this is certainly not an optional purchase for half of our population. So that's the reason I was very kindly called by local governments a couple months ago offering and saying, hey, Senator Orr, would you not make it optional for the locals to opt in or opt out of sales tax at the local level? You see the fiscal note I had before me at the time, you see it's 8.7 million to the ETF, 2.5 to Mr. Albritton and the general fund, and then among local governments, 15 million spread all across the state. So when $15 million is a lot of money, but when you float it across the state and the billions that they receive in sales taxes at the local level, to me, it did not seem that much. Now, like I said, there's an amendment that will be brought to peel that off and make it optional, which we've done in other cases, I think. I'm trying to think of one, but I don't know that we have or haven't. We did on the grocery tax.
Sure did.
So that's one, but so I'll put it out there. I see Senator Smitherman's hands raised. We'll talk about it. We'll have the amendment. We'll vote it up or down, see what the collective will of this body is. If you disagree with the chair, I understand. You've probably gotten calls from mayors and commissioners and whatnot, but when you also balance that out with what we're talking about and the amounts we're talking about, to me, I think as a policy, be it local, be it state, we can make that decision and feel good about it. Senator Smitherman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think most of the time, Mr. Chairman, I tell you, I'm which, even on some tough ones when we've talked. But on this one, I'm going to have to lean toward this amendment. I mean, first of all, we've set a precedent with the grocery tax by allowing this, and we did the right thing. And I'm not, I'll say it this way. We should not be affecting the budgets of cities by passing legislation that's going to decrease their revenue. At some point, we got to bag out and let them have some of this home rule for themselves. We sometimes we get this is what the kids said. In fact, when I was at basketball practice at 6 this morning, the kids said, sometimes we get geeked all up because we can do this and do that we don't pay any attention on what we doing to people. For the giddiness and the excitementness to be doing what we call ourselves doing. In this case, we putting cities at a disadvantage. If a city gets $100,000 and just lose that, that's $100,000 that they can't put on street and sanitation or put on repairs or infrastructure or pay some bills. So I would say that from our level, sure, let's make our decisions and do what we're gonna do, and that'll show what we are trying to do. They need to go to those cities and then and make those appeals and give them their opportunity to make those decisions themselves. So
I understand, and again, we'll vote it up or down. There's not one committee member around this table that can say that I visited with them and asked them to vote a certain way. Again, I know you've heard from probably those that are supporting the amendment. I may be too ideological, Senator Smitherman, when it comes to the dollars. And I would also just say that the same people that vote for our mayors and councilmen and commissioners are the same people that vote for us. So, but I hear what you're saying. They got budgets to make and bills to pay. Senator Figures.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me say thank you for bringing this bill. And my name would have been on here as a co-sponsor too, but I was out sick the first couple of days of the session. So I'm sorry that it's not.
I'm sorry.
But I really appreciate you bringing it. And let me just remind everybody, for those of you who haven't been here, but I have been pushing this issue and this amendment for everything that comes before us where there's a vote for taking the sales tax off for 27 years. Being a former council member in the city of Mobile, I have always stated that we did not need to make the decision to take their revenue away. So I'm glad that this body is finally coming around to seeing that point, but I just wanted to say I've been saying that same thing for 27 years. But thank you, and thank you, Senator Gudger, for bringing this amendment.
All right. Any more comments before we go to Senator Gudger? Before you offer it, Senator Albritton?
Thank you. Good bill. I think this is a means of trying to shift responsibility for government financing away from those that can, I won't say lease, but have a little option in that regard. I did not co-sponsor because I knew it would be detrimental to general fund. This is going to require $2.5 million. Now, with the governor's budget in hand, I got to adjust the estimates and such downward to reflect that. I just hope that looking at the sponsor and co-sponsors on this is that when we receive the particular bill that may enhance general fund and ETF revenues, that we have the same folks that's willing to cut the taxation and reduce revenues to the state, that you have the foresight to vote for the enhancement bill that may be coming our way soon. I appreciate everyone's names that I can use. Thank you.
All right, now I think it's time to hear from Senator Gudger. Senator Gudger.
First of all, you'll see that on this particular bill, Mr. Chairman, that I helped co-sponsor this bill. I think it's a great bill. We should have done this a long time ago. Thank you for thinking of it and bringing it. Number two, I do think as a next city councilman, same as a lot of people around this table or county commissioner, that we should not meddle in the home rule. And so that's why I'm bringing the amendment. But at this time, if there's no other discussion, I'd like to make a motion on adopting the amendment if that's possible.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? And again, I just ask you all vote your consciences. There's no way for me to gauge those consciences until we get a vote or I come around and talk to you. And that's a difficult thing to do when I got 16 or 15 or however many there is. All right, clerk, call the roll.
Senator Albritton?
Aye.
Senator Butler? Aye. Senator Chasteen? Aye. Senator Figures?
Aye.
Senator Gavan? Senator Gudger? Senator Hatcher? Senator Hovey? Senator Melson? Senator Roberts?
No.
Senator Sessions? Senator Singleton? Senator Smitherman?
Aye.
Senator Wagner? Senator Allen? Senator Orr?
Okay, we got 11 ayes, 4 nays. The practical outrule the ideological, and so the amendment is adopted. We're on the bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Senator Smitherman.
I move favor report.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Senator Melson. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Senator Albritton?
Aye.
Senator Butler? Senator Chasteen? Senator Figures?
Aye.
Senator Gavan? Senator Gudger? Senator Hatcher? Senator Hovey? Senator Melson? Senator Roberts? Senator Sessions? Senator Singleton? Senator Smitherman?
Aye.
Senator Wagner? Senator Allen? Senator Orr?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
15 ayes, 0 nays. The bill is given a favorable report. Senator Smitherman.
You know, next time, just put your hand across the aisle and hand me the bill so I can be a co-sponsor.
Okay. Hey, I
said
came
it
around.
I said it jokingly because I actually have worked on a couple of bills with him and one I'm sponsoring even now. So that's why it was a joke, saying that this right here, you probably had it down there anyway in front of my face, but let me know if you have this, because this is a very good bill.
Yeah, thank you.
Actually,
I came
everybody's
around and I
except you
got
and I.
a couple senators from the minority caucus to
Oh, no, you got everybody,
so,
but
I don't know where you were at the time. I know Senator Figures was out sick, and I wish in our rules you could subsequently come in and, if you like a bill, to co-sponsor. And
Let's look
I've
at
talked to Mr. Harris about it, and he
Yeah, I got you.
I got a little bit of pushback on that. All right, clerk, call the next bill.
Senate Bill 61 by Senator Orr.
All right, this bill, we have a public hearing today. What I would like to do is bring up, let me talk for a minute about the bill,
Mr. Chairman.
and then Senator Smitherman.
When you talk about the bill, or even if you bring somebody up, like, not who wants to speak next, but I'm sure you're going to bring somebody up that's going to really, I would like to be able to ask questions then.
Yeah.
I mean, the questions. I'm not trying to cut off the other people that want
Right,
to speak,
right.
but I think I can better understand this bill,
Okay.
if I do that for real. I think that I can really kind of understand it, because I got a few questions so I can get some understanding.
Mr. Chairman, are we voting on this today?
Actually, we are not.
Okay,
We're
good.
not going to vote on it today, but we do want to hear from both sides, pros and cons, and we're working on something I'll talk about. So this bill, members, let me go back in time. I think it was October, and received a phone call along with Chairman Garrett to join in or to work with the governor and her desire to have education savings account legislation in this session, in the 2024 session. So Chairman Garrett and I had several meetings, several discussions with the governor's people, starting, again, I think it was October, through the coming months, and here until January, and finally we kind of had a final bill that we were comfortable in sponsoring. A lot of changes were made from October, between October and January, and I want to compliment the governor's education team, her policy team, and others, her attorneys, because they were very receptive to the changes. You know, this committee had a bill last session that, in my opinion, and many of yours, was very high dollar and very expensive, and they had real concerns that the education budget would have difficulty sustaining that high dollar amount that was in that bill. This bill is much more moderate in amount and much more sustainable going forward. What I'd like to do is ask Mr. Moore, Nick Moore, the governor's education policy advisor, to come and walk through the bill with you all. And then Senator Smitherman, if you'll let him get a first pass, then we'll open it up to questions, and then we'll have our public speakers, those that have signed up to speak, come talk to the committee. So it'll take a while today and to hear all of that, but I know you'll be interested. I would say that we had a meeting yesterday in my office with representatives from what I like to loosely term the education family. They came and brought concerns that they had about the bill, and I certainly appreciate their doing that. The two main concerns were capping the ESA account, which starts at $100 million, but it can roll forward. How big will that pot be? And that was a concern of theirs, and I think we are going to be able to address that. The other was the triggering mechanism for any growth of the $100 million that we start off with. Is should there not be a triggering mechanism before that number increases? And in principle, there was an agreement yesterday in my office. We don't have a substitute today for this committee, so I didn't want to give a half-baked substitute that all parties had seen and say, please vote on this substitute. I don't think that's fair to you all, but we want to move ahead, and that's the reason we're going to continue with our public hearing, which we're going to need to have anyway. And then the expectation would be we look at voting on it our next meeting. So that being said, Mr. Moore, do you want to come address the committee and walk them through the bill and any pertinent discussions from yesterday that you might want to include?
Thank you, Chairman Orr. Thank you, members of the committee, and want to begin by sharing just a little bit about Governor Ivey's philosophy, why we're pursuing such a piece of legislation at this time. A lot of it stems from the fact that the governor, working with you, has set a goal for Alabama to reach a level of excellence in education that includes reaching the top 30 among states nationally by the year 2030. In order to do that, the governor feels that we can concurrently make historic and unprecedented investments in public education, as is testified by this year's ETF, and by the fact that during the Ivy administration, we've seen year-to-year increases in the ETF, historic teacher pay raises this year, having the starting teacher salary be the highest in our peer states in the Southeast, and also recognizing the fact that during the Ivy administration, again, working with you, per pupil spending in traditional district schools has increased over 15%, or $1,500 per pupil, or over 30%. And the ETF itself has grown by $2.5 billion during the Ivy administration, or over 40%. And not just resources, but also the policy of working with you on the Literacy Act, the Numeracy Act, principal leadership in the development, and we could go on, but every level of public education from pre-K through the workforce, tightening up the leaks in our talent pipeline so kids go to school ready to learn. They're literate and numerate, they're college and career ready, and they have a credential or a next step into the workforce or their post-secondary step. So that's the governor's vision for public district schools, and that will continue. But at the same time, we've got to recognize that our K-12 student population during the Ivy administration has shrunken by 1.2%. And also, it was great that we got our students back in school after COVID-19, and we've seen our NAEP scores go up during that period of time, but we've got to sustain that momentum. So the governor believes that we can concurrently address and continue investing in our traditional public schools while also being a state that is recognized as having the most education freedom and choice options for families. And so what the CHOOSE Act will do is make sure that if there's a student that has some unique circumstances, they may be just not having their needs adequately met by their resident district school due to the fact that they're not fitting into that current environment. And this also picks up where some of the traditional and other school choice options that y'all perfected last year, like charter schools and the Accountability Act, pick up. So the idea is we're addressing public education and then also making sure that we've got the most school choice options at our disposal. This is also a bill that, as we get into it, you'll see balances the policy considerations of a host of stakeholders, those that are very vocally supportive of universal school choice, and then also those that want to make sure that we've got prudent policy, academic and fiscal measures on here to make sure that this is in balance. And we feel like that the governor, again, working very closely with y'all, have developed a draft that seeks to balance those different concerns. So what this bill would do is provide for an advanced refundable tax credit that would provide $7,000 to an eligible participating student, and an eligible participating school could be a public school that chooses to participate, that maybe determines to have open enrollment, and it doesn't change open enrollment rules. In fact, we're not adding or taking away regulations at any level in this bill, maintaining current law in regard to things like open enrollment. And as we go through, I'll point out a couple of those other features. So if a public school wanted to allow out-of-district students, as some do, they would be able to do so, and then a student could use this to pay for the out-of-district fee. A school that chooses not to have open enrollment, they would not have to do so under this bill. So $7,000 for a student that enrolls in a participating public or private school, and then $2,000 for a homeschool student, or $4,000 for a family that has got more than one homeschool student. So whether it's 2 or 5, they would be 4 in that circumstance. And the reason for that is in our modeling, and there's not a single model that has the exact number, but looking at a composite of what is the instructional cost of the state per pupil share, discounting for capital costs and other fixed overhead costs that a physical school has, that's about the level of the instructional component. This program would be a CHOOSE Act fund, and the draft says that beginning in the 2025 tax year, and the program would begin in the 25-26 school year, that not less than $100 million would be appropriated to the CHOOSE Act program fund. And as Senator Orr mentioned, there's some ongoing discussions around making sure that we've got market forces that are helping to inform y'all's decision-making on that. So, for example, making sure that there's an adequate level of uptake, that students are using it, and that we don't see an inordinate number of dollars rolling over in the fund year to year if there's not that uptake. And so also something that's come up in a big way on this is around assessment and accountability. And accountability is important, and the governor has talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of families and students and teachers, and herself being a teacher, and recognizes that it is important to compare apples to apples. And we currently have the state Alabama Comprehensive Assessment Program for public district schools, which is aligned to the Alabama State Course of Study, and it's a very strong assessment. Worked many years and was involved in the development of that. It's aligned to the Alabama Course of Study. There are schools that will be participating schools in the Choose Act program, if it comes to fruition, that do not teach the Alabama Course of Study, but do have a course of study that's very high quality, as testified to the fact that, you know, for example, if the Catholic diocese was a standalone LEA, it would be the largest LEA in the state. And their course of study is not aligned to the Alabama course of study. So therefore, if they were required to take the ACAP, that would be comparing apples to oranges. So the true comparison of apples to apples is to make sure that a school has an assessment that's aligned to their standards. And nobody is trying to say here that the state is trying to tell a school system what curricula that they are to teach. And I think y'all have been very clear on that. And the governor's certainly very strong on that. But assessment equals curricula. If we say in this bill, you've got to take the ACAP, then that leaves a school to say, well, we're either going to be forced to change what we teach, or it's simply a poison pill to say they can't participate. So there's a third way, or a better way to do that, which is to say, have an assessment that's aligned to the curricula that you're teaching, to have a norm referenced achievement or aptitude assessment, and there's the precedent there in the AAA for that. And certainly the Department of Revenue has been able to provide those assessment results to parents and families, and for those that want to look at it from a comparable way, to look at the schools that are offering the SAT-10, for example, or the ACAP. But when we talk to parents, they look at assessment like a flashlight rather than a hammer. They want to know how their students are doing against their peers, but they also want to know how safe the school is. Are the students learning to read at grade level? Are they moving on to a post-secondary opportunity in the workforce? And glad that have the ability to look at all of the public district schools regarding their ACAP scores, and that's very important for accountability. But we don't increase or decrease the funding for district schools based on their ACAP score. Now, we do have the 8F report card, and that's important to use for continuous improvement and for folks at the local level and the state level to help support them. And we're certainly doing that through the Office of School Improvement and a number of things that have happened, whether it's the Numeracy Act or just expanding the focus on the Governor's School Turnaround Project. But the assessment is just one component of that. And so if just to put a fine point on the assessment part, for the purposes of an ESA, if everybody has to take the ACAP, that is truly comparing apples to oranges. If we want to compare apples to apples, we're going to make sure that if it's a Catholic school or another high-quality private or Christian or whatever school it is that's participating, that they have an assessment that's aligned to their standards, that their parents and students can access the data. Now, the Choose Act fund does not allow the current year funds to roll over. So in other words, you get $7,000 to use up to that amount for eligible expenses. If that family doesn't utilize all those dollars that year, it would revert to the Choose program fund. In the same way that if a student were to take up the Choose program fund and then go back to their resident district school, their ESA would revert back to the Choose program fund. And then the ADM would be rectified in the same way that any student that transfers into another LEA from district to district would do. And there's certain cases to where if there's an inordinate amount of growth and, in some parts of the state that happen from time to time, there's a way to address that. But that is generally speaking the four corners of the program. We've got a $7,000 for participating students attending a school, $4,000 for homeschoolers, not less than $100 million in the Choose Act fund that would begin in the 25-26 school year. In those first two program years, 25-26, 26-27, families that are at or below 300% of the federal poverty level, which is approximately $90,000, would be preferenced. And so that's important so that we're allowing students and families that may be wanting to go from a priority school, or they're those that would most benefit from this type of opportunity or preference first. And then if there's a year or two to where maybe y'all decide not to increase that 100 million, those students are in there. And this is also going to preference existing students that are already participating. So if you're in the program this year, you don't have to worry about going through some kind of a eBay auction to where you've got to press the button in a certain amount of time. You're in there. It also preferences siblings of participating students, and also 500 slots are reserved for students with unique needs, and that's defined as a student with an IEP or a 504 plan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moore. Senator Smitherman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a series of questions, okay? So I don't, it ain't like one question, okay, thank you. I got a series of, I'm trying to really say it to the committee too. I got a series of questions that I want to present to you because I just need to be educated to know. The first question is this. Can you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine.
Okay, I just want you to know that, okay? But can you tell me how much right now the state gives per pupil in public education, the state?
Yeah, it moves every year, but I think it was 6,900 last year, and it's probably going to move up to around 7,100 this year, I believe.
That's the state portion.
The state per pupil spend, and then you've got
That we budget here at the state.
right. The
Okay.
state per pupil spend out of the ETF.
Okay, all right, good. I just wanted to know that part as well. The next question is that the participating schools, what criteria is used to determine whether or not they can be a participating school?
So number one, they will have to abide by the same health, occupancy, safety as existing public and private schools. So in regard to the regulatory factors, if you are allowed to be in operation as a public or a private school as of today, that's the minimum criteria. Then there's an application process to where they apply to be eligible to participate through revenue. There will be a rulemaking process if y'all pass this bill to where revenue lays out the application process. But the idea is to say, if under current state law, if you're able to operate as a private school or if you're a public school, that you would potentially be an eligible participating school.
Okay, right now, we're at a point that anybody could, if they meet those qualifications, that's being established, they could be a participating school.
If they are eligible to operate under current law. Yes.
Okay, so in other words, the public school right now would be eligible if they meet, whatever those criteria are.
Basically all public schools, because all of our public schools are operating in good standing. All of those private schools that meet the health, safety, occupancy, and other standards laid out under current law would also be potentially eligible.
Okay. All right. Now, what about you talked about and you may have addressed this, about the first 500 slots reserved for special needs students. What is the selection process in these students being selected? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to just tell you where I'm coming from. You maybe can touch right on it. We had a little program for putting storm roofs on buildings. And because the storms were always, pictured to be on the coast, most of them work was there. Now, they've changed now. They're working in the whole state. I want to say that. But when I got here, I noticed that was the situation. that's where I'm addressing this concern, is that what is that process so that all our kids in this state, no matter what system they're in, will have a equal opportunity to be selected? What is?
Yes, sir.
Is it more objective? Because, you know, a lot of subjectness has a way of not being equitable sometimes. So can you explain that to me?
Sure. So 500 slots are reserved for students with special needs. If they've got an IEP or a 504, that's the basic eligibility. They will apply in the same manner that every other student would. And also, I think it's important to note that special education services provided by the resident district school under federal law will still be made available to that student, even if they chose to participate in the LEA or in the ESA, and that's federal law. But revenue would receive those applications. And what this preference for those with unique needs would do was allow them to be preference even if they, for example, were not at or below the 300% of the federal poverty level. So revenue would receive all those applications, and there could be a circumstance to where there's great popularity in the program that there could be more than 500 students, and then they would begin to rank order them with income on top of the fact that they have a unique need. So we hope that there's not a waiting list, and maybe we get the exact right Goldilocks amount on this. But if there is a potential wait list, they would then begin looking at income, and there'd be an application process for everybody to apply in a window, and then those folks would be rank ordered their adjusted gross income against the federal poverty level.
Now, those special students, some of them going to come with, what is it, a 504?
504.
Yeah, 504. Will that expense be calculated and, you know, to fit whatever the budget is so they can get those services that they'll need beyond normal services?
Those services would be provided by the resident school district.
Okay. So in other words, that the service, if it was even at this private school, they would, whatever services that fits that category, they would be responsible for it?
They're not mutually exclusive. There could be some services that the student pays for that are eligible out of the ESA that complement or are in addition to the services provided by the resident school district.
Okay, all right. Now, I see in here where it's 100 million that's coming out of the surplus. Is that a fix? And I guess the chairman probably could answer that even better than you at this. Is that a fix? That's going to be a fixed notion that if it's going to come, it's coming out of surplus. If we don't have surplus, then we're going to go into the corpus to reduce the funds that we would normally appropriate for public education. They're going to have to take the hit too to make sure that the money is there when we don't have surplus?
I'm glad you brought that up, as it's important to note how this, the flow of funds. So the way that this would work is that the funding would not come out of the ETF. It would come out of sale and use tax before the cap. And so there's never been a situation to where the amount of revenue into the state from sale and use tax has even been close to the expenditure on education-related expenses. And so this, you know, and it's not less than 100 million. So let's say that you chose to do the 100 million, that would, in the third year, come right off the top, not out of the ETF, not out of the foundation program, into the Choose program fund, in the same way that some of the other tax credit programs that we have established. And so there would not be any hit to the ETF. Now, this year, there is $50 million out of the supplemental that is being reserved for the Choose Act program fund, and y'all could do that again next year or choose not to, but there's nothing in the language of the bill that would cause any of this money to come out of the supplemental or the ETF itself. It contemplates it coming prior to the cap and just directly out of the sales and use tax proceeds.
Are those proceeds that are coming directly out, or the proceeds that flow into the education trust fund?
Not into the education trust fund, to just flow into the state.
Okay. Oh, okay. 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 I see what you're saying. Now, let me see. I have one other question, I think. the oh yeah, the assessments. That's what it was. How, and I don't want you to have to explain. You did a good job of explaining it. I didn't understand it fully, but what I heard you say that you're gonna meet a school where it is. I mean, you correct me now. Don't buy into what I'm saying. I'm trying to make my interpretation. You're gonna meet a school where they are from a curriculum standpoint, so that they can be able to make an assessment based on their curriculum, whether or not they meet the standards that you're all saying. Did you not say that?
Well, I think we're saying the same thing. Yes, sir. It's a lot of times, and I'm guilty of it as a bureaucrat here in Montgomery, and people sort of in this bubble of the education world, they view assessment as the most important factor in the world, and as though that's the singular thing that families and students look at about whether their school's succeeding or not. I think what all of the families we've talked to, they see it as one of several things in a battery of factors that they look at. But when they do look at it, what they want it to do is compare apples to apples, and they want to know, how is my student doing against what they're learning in school? They're not as much worried about how is my student doing compared to somebody that lives 400 or 500 miles away. They want to make sure that assessment is aligned to what that young man or young lady is seeing in their classroom, so that way they can talk with their teacher and make any kind of instructional adjustments. Now, that's great where we can have comparability, and there's all kinds of folks out there, psychometrists, that can look at one assessment, compare that to another. But when it comes down to it, we have basically two choices. We could say, you could use the assessment that's aligned to your curricula that your student is engaging with, or we could say everybody takes the ACAP, and if everybody has to take the ACAP, then they are forced then to change their curricula to be able to participate in the program.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. I have a few other things, but I'm not going to monopolize all the time, so I'm going to yield back to the president.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore, we got a general fund meeting at 11 in here, so if you can keep those answers a little bit more succinct, and we got other people to listen to. I do want to ask Mr. Fulford to briefly and loudly walk through the mechanics on the funding.
So if you look at page no less than $100 million. Over in the supplemental bill, a supplemental appropriation of $50 million into this fund to get it started. That fund is a non-reverting fund. So whatever is not used this year will roll over to the next year. If you did the same next year, you'd have $100 million in it before the program is even effective. The reason we look in the budget, it will have a total dollar amount in there. I think part of the revenue that Randy thanked, because there has to be appropriation authority to start this program. That's where the money's coming from. And like I said, it's no different than any other. It operates kind of like the federal child tax credit. It's an enhanced refundable tax credit. You get it if you qualify for the credit. This has nothing to do with an individual's tax liability, whether or not they did or didn't have $7,000 worth of liability. It is if you qualify, if you have a qualifying child, you get that refundable tax credit available to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fulford. Senator Singleton?
Number one, I want to know, how does this compare with already accountability? Can you stack two together? Can they use one out of accountability fund of the $10,000 we already offer families? Can they use this choose money so it be stacked to $17,000?
can't be stacked at the individual level as far as one student being able to claim both programs. If they did, you know, the Accountability Act now being 10,000 and this being 7,000, if we looked at state, local, and federal altogether, it's somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000, depending on where you're sitting. So that would end up almost double funding them, but it can be stacked at the macro level to where potentially, if and what a great outcome of this would be is if there's areas to where, you know, with the Accountability Act, with it being a more, and by design being a more limited in nature program, it was never able to affect the supply side at scale. So coupled with the CHOOSE program, there could be a potential for somebody, particularly in a rural area, to open up a new school and to be able to use the ESA and the AAA together to be able to make sure that that becomes then a viable new option, a new form of supply in that.
But a student, just to answer the question, the student couldn't get $17,000.
No.
Okay, all right. School could have mix and match between the school of the two programs, but not for a particular student. Senator Singleton.
Okay, I guess I have one other question. How does this affect the foundation programs in terms of units and maybe Title I money that's coming to public schools?
It holds harmless all federal and local money, so it does not affect Title I money or local money at all. And what was the second part of your question?
On the foundation.
The foundation. And also does not affect, you know, this comes out above the cap and it does not lower any foundation, you know, it doesn't affect the divisor or any local funding.
Okay, so we keep using the word cap. This is really a floor of $100,000.
I think that's a way you could look at it.
Rise to 400 million, we don't know where we're going. And this could have to be recurred. And even if at the point that we said 100 million per year, as we start rolling this into this fund, if we don't use for 50 million, we still gonna be pulling 100 million out.
Well, that's some things that Senator Orr mentioned that we're taking a look at and would love to talk with you about. And there's ongoing discussions about how do we potentially put a cap on the overall fund so that and let market forces drive it. If there's a lot of use of it and we say it's 100 million and you use 90 million, then maybe that's a reason to want to put some more in there. But if you've got 100 million in there and you're only using 20, then maybe not. So if you could put something on that floor side to make sure that if you move it up, that it's got to be based on demand. And then at the other end of the spectrum to say, if you've got $400 million that we're rolling over, maybe that's not a good situation and we don't allow that to happen. So that's two ends of it.
This is one thing that, you know, we've been very prudent about and very conservative on our spending. And I've been hearing because we've been holding back on spending money, it's because we may be looking at some proration or maybe looking at, you know, some means of a market crash or something come along. And in a sense of that, if we get to that point, if this money has to come out every year at $100 million, we're actually going to end up being prorated, you know, on the back of public school kids, if in fact this money's not there, it has to come out the budget.
Well, there's no proration clause in this, and you know the general appropriations bill trumps any other positive legislation. So in such an exigent circumstance, there, you know, if the general appropriations bill said less than that, then that would trump any other legislation.
Because I know we put a sunset on Senate Bill 100 last year on cap on what they could spend out of that new fund that we put in. What's the Senate Bill 100?
The rolling reserve, what was that? Yeah.
$299. Maybe you have so many.
I just try to keep you busy, Senator, you know.
Well, I'm gonna stop right there. I have a lot more questions. I will wait since we're gonna go.
Next week. All right, any other questions? All right, let's begin our public hearing very quickly. You got 2 minutes each. We got Ashley McLean, School Superintendents Association.
Well, there's nothing like going first, Senator. First, I want to just say thank you to the governor, her staff, the budget chairs for all the work that you've done on this. We've come a long way from where we started with school choice conversations. You have addressed many of the concerns that superintendents have. We still have a few. From the very first discussions of school choice, we have talked about two things consistently from a superintendent's perspective: financial and academic accountability. Financial accountability specifically necessary to protect the resources of the majority of Alabama students, which is 720,000 students in Alabama public schools, and then to make certain that the money is actually being used as you intended it to be. And this bill does address one of our major concerns around financial accountability in that it does not send money directly to a parent. It sends it to accredited private schools or education service providers. So we appreciate that. But what the bill doesn't have, and has been discussed just a moment ago, was that there is no monetary cap on the program. The bill says that you'll appropriate no less than $100 million a year. So you've given us a floor, but there's no ceiling. So we have a base amount that we're obligated to spend each year, but we don't have the other end of that. So there's no ceiling on how much that increase could be. And as Senator Orr said and Mr. Moore said, we're in conversations about that. They've been very willing to have those, and we really appreciate that. But that is a concern of ours. The second thing that we're really concerned about is the academic accountability, and that's testing. And Mr. Moore again gave you a really good explanation of assessments. Superintendents do think in their mind what we believe is that an assessment is ACAP. It's what we're held accountable to. It's what we would like ESA students to be held accountable to. I understand the reasoning behind it, but from a superintendent's perspective, the reason that that's so important is we are constantly being attacked on our academic performance. And so if we don't have a measure to say they publicly report, at least publicly report your scores, how do we compete? If competition breeds improvement, then we need to know that we're in a head-to-head, and what does that look like when we're making that comparison? We can't do that if we don't know what their test scores are and if we don't have a like-minded test. That's why that's so important. And I'll say that one of the things that—
All right, your 2 minutes has expired. I'm sorry. We'll pick it up next.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, with Terry Lathan on the proponent side.
Thank you, Senator. I'm Terry Lathan from Mobile County. Special nod to my senators from Mobile, Senator Figures and Senator Sessions. I'm a former 5th and 6th grade public school teacher, and I actually am a current member of the Alabama Math Task Force that you legislated last year, so we're working on that. I stand to rise in solid support at SB 61, and I appreciate the back and forth from both bodies that are willing to give and take to get us where we need. I do want to commend Senators Orr, Wagner, Livingston, Sessions, Allen, Price, Chastain, Williams, Albritton, Stutz, Butler, Senator Majority Leader Reed, Dr. Melson, along with the Speaker of the House and both House chairs of the Education Policy and Finance Committees for supporting this bill and being sponsors. I think this bill brings great news, actually. You don't really hear about great news in bills sometimes, but I think this one does. It is not in conflict with our public schools and the fine educators who are angels in our classrooms and across the board every day who serve. It's about a parent's choice with their dollars that we all pitch in. The government does not make money, it disseminates money to decide what their student needs. I commend you for using data. Only 2% of the public schools across the nation with these states that use school choice move. That means 98% love their schools and they don't budge. Also in that data, Alabama is saying it's time for school choice over and over in all polling. It is fiscally responsible. Congratulations for doing that and having record-breaking education budgets year after year, no proration since 2010. It is transparent and it shows accountability. It prioritizes, and we've heard today, special needs children and family units together. But mostly, it is freedom and trust of parents with their students and their dollars. So I rise to solidly support this bill. Well done to all who have been working, as Senator Orr said, since October in the governor's office. And there's no doubt that Alabama is ready for this strong school choice bill.
Thank you, Ms. Lathan. Next, we have Sally Smith from the school boards.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for the work that you've done on this. It's no surprise that school boards are not a real enthusiastic supporter of this bill. I know that's not a shocker, but we do want to get the bill right. We do want to protect the ETF long term, and my concerns are looking at the financial issues long term. I'm glad that it's been explained that there's no cap. In the media briefing and in the briefing the education community received, we were all told that there was a cap on the appropriations, and so I'm glad we're clarifying that it's not. Doesn't matter if there's proration, doesn't matter if there's an emergency, we're going to spend at least $100 million on this, and that number is going to go higher. We believe that as private schools figure this out and parents figure this out, they're going to demand that their private schools participate in this. So we're not worried about our children necessarily leaving public schools. We're worried about people currently in private schools have already opted out, wanting to make sure they get their $7,000. This is going to put tremendous pressure on you, and it will be a budget battle every year as parents figure this out and they say, we want our $7,000. Couple other things that concern us, that there's some misconceptions or myths, and one of them here we still need to work out. Will this really help poor children? We think that's the intent, but in reality, there are not a lot of choices in our poor communities. Our disadvantaged children need the services that our public schools provide that you don't get in private schools, particularly transportation. That's really going to be an issue. But particularly students with disabilities, I think there's some clarification that federal law does not require public schools to provide full service education to those in private schools. It is extraordinarily limited. And so that's why we want to make sure that this is not going to necessarily provide those services, or will there be a real option for those students because private schools don't provide those services.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Thank you.
I was advised by LFO, Mr. Fulford said, in the event, and Mr. Moore said this, in the event of a proration year with the budget, we can drop the amount below the 100 million. That would control as far as the appropriation. That's it's not an appropriation. All right, next we have Nathan Sanders on the proponent side. Mr. Sanders?
Hey, good morning, members. Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me. My name is Nathan Sanders. I'm speaking in support of SB 61. I'm with EdChoice. EdChoice is a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and our mission is to advance educational freedom and choice for all as a pathway to successful lives in a stronger society. And what we do, I guess a big part of what we do at EdChoice, our bread and butter, if you will, is we study empirical data and research these private school programs across the country. So that's what we do. And so what we love to say at EdChoice is anyone can promise what school choice programs could, would, or should do, but we prefer to rely on what the data shows that these programs are already doing. And so I just want to dive just a little bit into some of these things. So the public school side of this, the private school competitiveness on the public side, I just want to read some key points. So there is compelling evidence that public school students experience modest test score gains after private school choice programs are introduced or expanded in some of these states. And so out of 29 studies, 26 showed positive effects. And I just want to read some key points very briefly. 89% of reviewed studies find that private school choice programs tend to induce public schools to improve. Moreover, the research suggests that these positive effects are stronger when there's a greater degree of choice for families and thus competition among schools. The next one is the more private schools are in an area and the students have a choice, programs making them eligible, the more local public schools tend to improve their reading, English, and math proficiency scores. And lastly, a 22 study examines the effect of student eligibility expansion of the Florida tax credit program in Florida on students who remained in the public public schools. The program, one of the oldest and largest in the United States, improved math and reading test scores and also reduced rates of absenteeism and school suspensions for students remaining in public schools. Another study we did was on test scores, participants' test scores in these private school programs, and we found that students who won voucher lotteries and used these vouchers saw positive gains on test scores that equate roughly to 49 more days of learning in math and 28 more in reading and English, and that was at 17 studies, 11 showing positive. And lastly, I'll be quick, some key points on participant attainment, as Mr. Moore was speaking earlier. It shows that parents do care more about the just test scores when you look at graduation rates and such. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
If I need to answer any questions or if you'd like me to share any of these studies with you, I'd be glad to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Next, we have Allison King.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I would like to start with saying that our founding fathers were quoted saying that public education is an absolute pinnacle to democracy. So I hope that when we're looking at this legislation, we will keep that at the forefront of our discussions. Specifically with the CHOOSE Act, our concerns center around primarily the fact that there is no cap. This is an completely open spending. It has been a minimum of $100 million that many others had said, but it could easily be $400, $500, $600 million a year that we'd be allocating. I would also like to say that this money is education money. All of this money that would be used for this would have flown into education dollars. I'd also like to speak to the fact that there is a lack of accountability that others have spoken to. Additionally, there is no requirement that the money stay in Alabama. These people could be using this for an online virtual school in Las Vegas or wherever they'd like to. There's also an allowance of that they don't have to be accredited. They could be in the process of becoming accredited. Additionally, line 112 says that it could still be potentially used for travel ball or equestrian camps if they partner with the private school. Public schools cannot can also, through this bill in line 207, they can accept voucher funds and also count the students towards their ADM. There's also no provision for money to go back to public schools if the child does not stay private. So if a child decides in October they don't like their private school, they want to go back to the public school, they can go back, but the dollars will not follow them. Additionally, they will have already missed the ADM cutoff for that year. Overall, I'd just like to say that taxpayer-funded vouchers overwhelmingly benefit students that have never attended public school. Between 80 and 90% of people that take advantage of these dollars nationwide are children that have always been in private school. Only 10% of Alabama families even pay $7,000 in taxes. So we're giving more money back to 90% of Alabamians than they have ever even put in. Many states are clawing back their voucher programs because of issues with this, so I encourage you to look at that. Also, although we've had record budgets, our budgets are slowing down, and we're going to have increased demands on the Education Trust Fund because of COVID funds drying up. So we don't have an outlandish amount of extra dollars to allocate to this program.
All right. Thank you, Ms. King. We next have Adam Thompson on the proponent side. We have three more speakers after. Mr.
Good morning, members, Senator Orr, members of the committee. Thank you for letting me speak this morning. My name is Adam Thompson. I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity. On behalf of the thousands of activists of Americans for Prosperity here in Alabama, we fully support this bill and encourage its passage. A few things I do want to highlight. It's been talked about this morning, but the things that this bill does not do. It does not defund public education. There's no change to the foundation formula. There's no change to local funding or federal funding. It is not a runaway program for expenses. You as the legislature have to appropriate each year, and you're in control of the budget and in control of how much money you spend on this program. It is not unaccountable. It has testing requirements, auditing requirements. Parents do not just get a box of cash. They have to go through the Department of Revenue to make sure that they're spending it appropriately through approved vendors. What this is, however, is an opportunity for families to make the best decisions for their students. This program, frankly, has the ability, much like the Accountability Act and others we have in this state, to change a child's life. And at AFP, we are agnostic to form of delivery. We think each parent should choose what situation best fits that child. And we believe in people. We believe people are capable of extraordinary things when you remove barriers. And too often, sometimes our education system is like that. And we have a great education system. My two children attend public school, but that's not the situation for everybody. And we believe we should empower everybody. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Next, we have Vic Wilson.
Thank you, Senator Orr, members of the committee. I won't be brief. I echo what Ashley has said and what Sally has said, and I really want to thank Mr. Moore and everyone for working with us on this. It's been a lot of work on this to get it to something. While I may not agree with it, I do agree that a lot of work has gone into it. I still have some concerns. We just happen to have 8 special education directors, Senator Smithman, in the building right now, in the room. So you feel free to ask them. I can send them down to your area if you'd like to ask them about those things as well, about how this is going to impact that. We're working. I was very proud to hear Senator Orr mention that there's a substitute, and I'm excited about seeing that, to see where we're moving in regards to the concerns we may have in this. We have 5 counties with our numbers who have no private school whatsoever. I do question where those dollars are going. It's coming out of those school systems, those counties that have no private schools in the counties. The majority of the counties in our state have 1 or 2, if any, private schools. Those private schools are congested in more urban areas and more highly populated areas. So that's something for you as senators to consider as well. So I really thank you for your consideration, and I really want to echo how much we have worked together on this to make this a bill. Well, I may not support, it's something we can work with. So I do appreciate that. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Next, we have Daphne Wilson on the proponent side.
Good morning, esteemed committee members, vested community stakeholders, and correspondents. I am Ms. Daphne Wilson. I am the parent of 2 children at Montgomery Catholic Preparatory School in Montgomery, Alabama. I have been an education advocate for school choice since 2015 under the leadership of Governor Riley, and it is with great pleasure that I see school choice blossom under the leadership of Governor Ivey. I have a why. I was raised that each generation was supposed to do better than the previous, and that was my goal as a parent. I'm a social worker, so I want my son to be a psychiatrist, and I want my daughter to be a nurse practitioner, someone can take care of me mentally and medically. All right, so all of us parents would like to see our children do better, learn more, and contribute more. Montgomery Catholic Preparatory School was voted the best private school in the region. Academically sound, challenging, after-school tutorials in each subject Monday through Thursday. Early morning personal development class at 7 a.m. every Wednesday. Now, I understand you all are talking about dollars. I was not issued a blank check for their tuition and fees. With 2 children attending, I had to still pay $600 a month. That's less than $400 with Evelyn there as a 10th grader. My son received a full scholarship at Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And as a parent, I want to make sure that all of Alabama's parents and their children are very well educated in the fact that if they sit in a freshman classroom, whether or not it's Alabama, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Tennessee State, that they are ready to compete. They know how to study, they know how to take a test, that they are prepared. And ultimately, that is what the school choice program is for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Members, I'm having an intern pass around just a memo that's totally unrelated to this discussion, but I thought it interesting and thought it might be helpful to you as you think about tuition and things like that. Might be of interest. Lastly, we have Carol Gunlock.
Close enough, Senator. I am Carol Gunlock. I'm a senior policy analyst at Alabama Arise. First of all, Senator Orr, I am sorry I am speaking on this bill and not the previous bill, which Alabama Arise strongly supports and which we are very pleased to see come out of committee. SB 61 appears to lock future legislatures into an ongoing appropriations of at least $100 million a year, whether we can afford it or not, whether we can need it or not. We appreciate that a sub is coming that will address this and look forward to seeing it. Refundable tax credits, however, reduce revenue to the Education Trust Fund and therefore further impact further reductions to the grocery tax, which I know we are all committed to, the calculation of the rolling reserve CAC, and ETF reserves. While targeted to high-need children in the first year, SB 61, beginning in 2027, removes those targets, and every child in Alabama, no matter how wealthy the family or how great the need, will become eligible for an education subsidy. It also shifts responsibility for overseeing education spending and quality to the Department of Revenue instead of to the Alabama Department of Education. And it allows Revenue to contract out that responsibility and management to unidentified private contractors who will, of course, be paid and expect to be paid for providing that service. The children most hurt by this bill will be the lowest income and most rural children in the state, whose parents cannot afford the resources to support private schooling, such as transportation and school meals, even if there are private schools available. The act will remove state education dollars from rural Black Belt and Wiregrass counties, which, as the previous person said, do not have private schools available. Ultimately, this act takes money from all of us to support the wealthiest people in the state who may or may not even need our tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, members, for your patience, and we stand adjourned.